happened in the river. Both the helicopter and the plane crashed in the river.
I look after those people, and they were my inspiration.
I don't know how to feel, and we said, well, whatever you do, just try and feel.
Was just loved by everyone, from the adults running the club to the smallest skaters to the people that are, competing for a shot at the Olympics. They all just adored him.
It's so hard to just imagine having the parents and the coaches all wiped out at the same time.
The students, they're our kids. They're our brothers and sisters.
This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history.
The accident last night was horrific and heartbreaking. There will be a thorough and careful investigation. There needs to be.
What they didn't see, why they didn't see the airplane, that'll be part of the investigation.
Saying your thoughts and prayers are with them just doesn't feel like it's enough.
I'd like to request a moment of silence for the victims and their families, please.
As we come on the air tonight, CBS News has learned only one air traffic controller was managing a pair of aircraft that collided over Washington, D.C. last night. It's a job normally done by two people. So happening right now, the search for survivors is over until the morning as the rescue efforts after the country's deadliest plane crash since 2001 has become a recovery mission. Recovery crews spent all day combing the Potomac River. At this hour, crews have pulled at least 40 bodies from the wreckage following that collision between a passenger jet and an Army helicopter over D.C. They also have recovered the black boxes from both aircraft. American Airlines saying that 64 people were on board its jet. The U.S. military had 3 soldiers in the helicopter. And the NTSB is working to determine exactly how the collision happened.
We look at the human, the machine, and the environment. That is standard in any part of our investigation.
All right, so some of these images you're seeing right here coming into our newsroom tonight. You can see the photos of the actual cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder from the plane as the NTSB continues its investigation. Well, tonight the nation is in mourning. It was an emotional scene in Wichita as the community came together to remember those lost in the crash over D.C. The mayor there offering words of comfort as people grieved and learned family and friends were on board. Tonight, our team is learning more about the victims and hearing from the people flying hours after the tragedy. We're going to check in with Chase Bachman here in just a second. He spent the evening at Detroit Metro talking with passengers. But first, we're going to check in with Dan Cummins. He is following the newest information for us on more on those lives lost in this tragedy. Dan?
Jeff, takes your breath away, doesn't it? CBS News has learned the crew chief on the chopper was 29-year-old Ryan O'Hara. Sam Lilly was the first officer on the flight, while Jonathan Campos was the other pilot killed. Additionally, 7 people returning from a guided hunting trip in Kansas were killed, according to a Facebook post by the Guide Service. U.S. Figure Skating confirms the passengers include 14 figure skaters from the U.S. National Figure Skating Team. The Skating Club of Boston lost 2 coaches, 2 young skaters, and their mothers. Top figure skaters from Russia were also on board the flight.
We lost family members today. This is something that will take a lot of time for us to process, and it will never be the same, but they will always be remembered. We want to let everyone know that the Skating Club of Boston will forever remember them.
We've also learned an Ohio college student, Grace Maxwell, was one of the 60 passengers. Maxwell was a student at Cedarville University, west of Columbus, the school said. Also confirmed 33-year-old Cincinnati native Elizabeth Keys was a passenger on the plane. Those killed also include 4 steam fitters, an incoming Howard professor, and a Connecticut father of 3. Reporting tonight, I'm Dan Cummins. So tonight we can confirm a U.S. figure skater from Toledo was not
on board the flight. Lindsay Fitzpatrick did compete in the U.S. Figure Skating Championships in Wichita this past week. She posted on her official team Instagram this morning that her heart goes out to everyone on the plane and their loved ones. Fitzpatrick previously skated with the Bowling Green Skating Club. The Midwestern Synchronized Skating Championship in Michigan began on a somber note today. As skaters, coaches, and spectators, they observed a moment of silence for those who were killed. Many in the local skating community knew people on the flight, including a woman who says her daughter trained with some of the victims.
This morning, I clicked open and looked at a list and realized that I knew multiple names on that list. It was kind of like a punch to the gut.
According to the Associated Press, 14 members of the skating community died in the crash. Let's break down for you this evening the exact timing of what has happened over the last 24 hours. It was 6:18 Eastern Time when American Airlines Flight 5342 took off from Wichita. On board, 60 passengers and 4 crew members. After the 2-hour flight, the plane began its descent toward Reagan National Airport in D.C. 30 minutes later at 8:15, the plane and helicopter collided. It only took 10 minutes for rescue crews to arrive on scene. And by 7:45 this morning, less than 12 hours after the crash and a full night of searching for any sign of survivors, authorities declared the mission now a recovery operation and acknowledged there were likely no survivors. People across the country, they continue to travel to their destinations by air, such as the case at Toledo Express and Detroit Metro. Chase Bachman, he headed to the Motor City to talk with passengers today. So Chase, what was the feeling at the airport?
Well, Jeff, the people we talked with say the news of the collision is terrible, but it's not enough to stop them from flying. They expect changes on a government level, but they still trust the industry to keep them safe.
I mean, it was just devastating, of course, and there's already so much devastation right now. It just felt like one more piece of the crumbling world.
It's been more than 24 hours since the news broke. The world has been following the tragedy out of Washington, D.C., and Americans are devastated.
Well, it was tragic, and the tragedy and the families and actually, you know, of course, the individuals who are on the plane and the helicopter, it gave me just a real quick hint of 911, and it was terrible. And you know, our hearts go out to everybody that's involved with that, and the rescuers too. I mean, God bless them.
It's in the back of your mind always, but you know, you got to pray for the people that it happens to, and just hope it doesn't happen to you.
The images of the wreckage, though, aren't stopping them from getting on a plane and making their trip.
I mean, all we can do is keep living our lives, right? Like, we can't, I mean, it's devastating. There's a lot of devastation, and as a people, we just have to keep moving.
You know, it's one of those things that happens, and it's unfortunate, and you just can't let it bother you. You got to keep going, you know.
Americans are still flying and are counting on the government to make changes to prevent this tragedy from happening again.
I don't really see a major disruption. Whatever they're doing, they're keeping it pretty safe, and they're moving it still.
Everybody should still feel safe to travel, and I think that overall our government does a very good job in keeping us safe in that respect, but there's always improvements to be made.
We talked to many more people at the airport today. A couple of them weren't even aware of the collision until we told them. It just gives you an idea of how fresh all of this still is. Reporting in studio, Chase Bachman, WTOL 11.
We're also hearing from a retired pilot with more than 20 years of experience in both the Air Force and with Delta Airlines. Alan Campbell says flying into Reagan National Airport is often tricky due to its complex airspace. Campbell says the busy airport requires careful navigation to avoid restricted areas, including the White House, the Pentagon, and the U.S. Capitol. He believes that mistakes may have been made before the crash involving communication with air traffic control.
The airplane at that speed and altitude and configured is not highly maneuverable. So he's pretty much got to go with his momentum in a certain direction. The helicopter could probably stop or maneuver much, much better. What they didn't see, why they didn't see the airplane, that'll be part of the investigation.
Now, the airspace above Toledo Express, not nearly as busy, but we do have the 180th fighter wing, the National Guard operating nearby. We asked the Guard about the shared airspace in the area. A spokesperson tells us, quote, the 180th Fighter Wing takes aviation safety very seriously and operates in coordination with the FAA and air traffic controllers at the Eugene F. Kranz Toledo Express Airport to ensure we properly deconflict any air travel, whether for training flights or real-world emergencies. And it continues, as integral partners, the 180th and the airport have worked together for many years, ensuring that we can meet our mission requirements while also supporting a host of civilian organizations all operating in the same airspace, end quote. First responders, they often face high stress and traumatic situations from major accidents to large-scale emergencies. Deputy Chief Barrett Dorner with the Swanton Fire Division says while training prepares them for the job, the emotional impact can last long after the scene is clear.
It is very hard for our people to ask for help. And so we have to build a system for them for that support, just like we're building a system for the response. As you know, the administrators in the fire service, we need to build that system. We need to build a culture where people can speak up and say they're struggling and get help.
Many in the fire service say the goal is to ensure responders are not only physically prepared for emergencies, but also mentally supported after the call. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story that we will continue to follow tonight and into the days and the weeks ahead. You can track the updates on our WTOL 11 Plus TV app right now. We've got an exclusive interview with a retired Air Force pilot with years of experience in the airspace above Reagan National Airport. You just heard a little bit from him just a second ago. Plus, comments from President Trump and much more. The TV app is free and it's on your Roku, Fire Stick, or Apple TV.